Nature's been one of my greatest teachers. At times when it feels like the reality in which I've been existing is crumbling and I recognize where I can't hold on to that reality because it's dissolving, and that sometimes I don't even know how to hold on to myself and hold myself as I feel myself shifting and old parts of me dissolving, and then realizing, like, what do you hold on to? And realizing that this journey isn't about holding on. It's about being able to let go, being able to not grip so tightly onto life and allow life to shift and evolve and change. And when I come to nature, it reminds me of that. Of how it doesn't hold on to the old branches that have fallen. It doesn't hold on to them. It allows them to fall wherever they may. Nature's such a beautiful mirror. And we just see the reflections on the water that remind us that it's all just a divine mirror, and what we see in nature is what we see within ourselves. What we see in another is what is within us. Because if it wasn't within us, we wouldn't be able to even perceive it. And just every time when I feel like life is reorienting itself, because that's really what's happening when things feel like they're dissolving and changing so rapidly. It's really that life is reorienting itself. It's more aligning to where we've gotten more clear on what it is we desire and how we want to live. So many of us are so clear on what we don't want, yet we lack the clarity of what we do want. And so we gain more clarity of what we don't want, and then we continue experiencing the feedback loop of everything we don't want when we're lacking the clarity of what it is we do. And that's where contrast serves us to assist us in discovering that clarity for ourselves, not someone else telling us what that is. For the inner teacher's always within. Always. Yes, there's external teachers that come forth to assist us, but at the end of the day, we always have the inner teacher that never leaves. That's always present, and just waiting for our awareness and invitation for its guidance. And we realize that as we gain clarity of what it is we want, in order for all of that to come forth, we have to witness the dissolution of everything that's not in alignment with what it is we want, or everything that's in opposition of what we want. It almost feels like you found a hack when we come to that place of realizing, like, oh, contrast is just here to serve me. It's just here to better guide and direct me, to bring my focus and to gain more clarity on what it is I do want. And as I choose to bring more focus to what it is I do want, that starts being shown more in the feedback loop. And then we come to these moments where life feels so confusing, and we're in this interim limbo because sometimes we don't realize what's happening, and we feel like, oh my God, life's just falling apart. What is happening? What is life? And it's really that life is just reorienting. All the things that were the contrast are dissolving and falling away, so that life can reorient itself to the newfound clarity we've discovered. Yeah, that process is sometimes painful because everything we've seen is familiar for so long. Even though it may be uncomfortable, those things can become familiar. And in that familiarity, there's discomfort when that familiarity starts shifting and changing, and life becomes unfamiliar. And we find ourselves in this confusing space as everything's integrating, and it feels like we don't know anything. But do we really know anything? We don't. Because everything's always changing. Everything's always evolving, including ourselves. And so every moment we're in this remembrance of self, this reconnection to self and what we truly are, beneath the illusions, beneath the familiarity of what we've always thought we were based on an external, and we really tune into what we really are deep within. Part of this universe. We're love, we're flow. A continual evolution. And even when we think we're being stagnant, we are still evolving. Just in ways that we cannot see. Ways we may not be able to measure. From above, it may not seem like this water is moving. It may seem stagnant, but it's always flowing. Even if it's slowly and gradually, it's always flowing. Life is always flowing. Life is always providing us with the mirror, with the feedback. And sometimes the feedback loop feels confusing because it's not familiar. What we're experiencing in the feedback loop is showing us how everything is changing. And how divine that is to witness that feedback of everything changing as it is a reflection of our inner self changing, our inner being changing, our consciousness changing and shifting and evolving. Matching to the quantum entanglement of our higher self that's just in a plane that isn't as dense as this. And because we experience density in this plane, that's why it takes sometimes a little bit longer for us to match to that quantum version of self. But we're always entangled with it. We're always entangled with that higher self. Always connected with it. And as we begin rising into higher states of consciousness and removing the density from our body, we are able to match that higher version of self and the energy and resonance of that higher version of self more quickly because we're removing the density. The density is what slows down that process. And on Earth, so many people have so much density that it may take them longer to connect into that resonance with their quantum self, with their higher self. But the deeper you can sit with yourself, the deeper you can sit with the aspects of what you don't want to look at and remove that density from your being, you're assisting yourself to move more into what it is you truly desire. To move more into the truth of who you are at your depth. Because in the depth is where we discover the magic. In the depth is where we discover the indescribable. Where we discover and experience self. The never-ending, eternal essence of self. An essence that only desires to radiate. That only desires to shine and to love and to include. And to be in openness. No longer closing off the heart to what may seem uncomfortable. No longer closing off the heart to what may seem unwanted. But instead of closing off the heart, we open our heart into it. We bring it into our loving arms and we sit with it compassionately and lovingly, holding it within our loving embrace for its safety and its bravery and courage to show itself to us. And our ability to lovingly accept those versions of self, those aspects of self, those depths within us. The depths that were even the surface aspects of ourselves, that we're merely acting from the level of consciousness that we had at the time. For that is when we truly come home, where we're not afraid to meet ourselves in the depth, where we're not afraid to look at those aspects of self that may not be desired, where we can look at them with radical acceptance instead of denying them and fractalizing ourselves for fear of discomfort. But the discomfort leads the way into freedom, into liberation. Discomfort is the gateway. Because when we allow ourselves to feel everything we're feeling without judging it, without condemning it, without denying it or trying to avoid it or numb it or push it away, is when we begin to take the path less traveled, to take our own unmarked path. For many people think if they just follow the path of the forest that has been already laid for them, that they will find the magical places no one has seen. You cannot find those magical places without straying away from the pack, straying away from the herd and the path that everyone else has set for you and told you were meant to march, and instead choosing your own path. Choosing your own path. Where you find the beautiful bridges that came right to you and you to them to lead you into the next version of self. To lead you to that next chapter where the seemingly unfamiliar becomes familiar. And that when we find ourselves in a reality that feels unfamiliar as the old is falling away and the dissonance is falling away because we've come to new clarity, and that new clarity is our resonance. That is when we can breathe. Realize that we can't grip so tightly onto one paradigm or the familiarity, because what is once familiar will soon again become unfamiliar as the unknown becomes your familiar, and we cycle back through that again. Cycling through the known and the unknown, and as the known becomes integrated and then release, the unknown surfaces. And we find ourselves in limbo, where it seems like nothing makes sense, yet all makes so much sense. It's just beyond our words. But the soul knows it all makes sense. The soul knows the cycle, the death and the rebirth. But does it ever really die is the question. Does anything ever really die? No, it doesn't. Like, yes, the physical body we may transcend the physical form, but our energy doesn't die. It's merely just returning back to source, and that's with every aspect of self that we are releasing. They don't die. They're just returning back to source, back to origin. Those old beliefs don't die. They just go back to source and back to origin as we release them from our being, because it's no longer resonant. It's served its place, and it's no longer needed for its assistance anymore. And we're safe to release that which no longer serves. We're safe to release that which no longer holds resonance for our being. For when it no longer resonates, it's merely saying, I'm ready to go back to source. Release me. Send me back to source with your help. This whole journey isn't a matter of adding on more, but releasing back to source, all of which is not our true resonance, all of which is not our higher self. As our higher self is not tied anymore to the illusion or to the stories. The higher self is existing within a different reality that does not hold the same density. And therefore, as we release our density, we are more aligning with that higher self, aligning more with source. And so nature, I'm so grateful for the teacher it is in my experience. It reminds me of the reflection that I need to see. The reflection that I may not be seeing when I'm so caught up in the humanness and the confusion as life appears to fall away, and as life appears to change and evolve and shift. It's like the thought of when we look down, are we really looking up? When you look in the water and you see your reflection and all you see is what's up above. And that what you experience within, when you look within, you then experience that reflected all around you. Nature has been my greatest teacher. When I feel triggered, when I feel scared, when I feel lost, I allow myself to stray from the path. When we allow ourselves to stray from the path, we can find some of the most beautiful spaces within ourself, and then that's reflected in our external. So wander away from the path of how everyone tells you to feel, of how you're taught to not sit with those deep emotions, to just move on and do something to distract yourself from it. What if you wandered from that path and sat with all those emotions that are merely calling out, saying, help me return to source? What if we strayed from the path to discover our own magic? To discover the true inner teacher. Thank you, nature. For all that you provide. Thank you for holding us when we don't even know how to hold ourselves. We lose sight of how to hold ourselves. And that throughout our journey, the way we hold ourselves is evolving. We need to be held in different ways throughout our journey. And I find that when I go to nature, it holds me in just the way that I need to be held. To bring forth the inner teacher through its reflection. Always guiding us to the path we need. And when we stray from the path that everyone else is taking, we discover for ourselves the path it is that we need to bridge the world in which we're currently living in with the world we desire to experience.